welcome to the Dream Machine. My name is Aaron.
And my name is Patricia.
Hey Patricia, feeling a bit golden today?
Yes, very golden. In fact, so golden that I'm ready to go on a grand adventure.
Okay, well let's go for it.
Oh my God, it's tough to be a god. Tread where mortals have not trod. Be deified when really you're a sham. Be an object of devotion. Be the subject of song. It's a rather touching notion. All those prayers and those salams. And who am I to bridle if I'm forced to be an idol? If they say that I'm a god, that's what I am.
So me and Patricia have seen The Road to El Dorado. It's a 2000 American animated adventure comedy film directed by Eric Bebo Bergeron and Don Paul, with additional sequences done by Will Finn, David Silverman, and also starring Kevin Kline, Kenneth Braga, and Rosie Perez, and also produced by DreamWorks Studios, of course. And also it's another film which the score has been done by Hans Zimmer. And but here's the thing about this. I would say about The Road to El Dorado, it's more of a road down the middle of the road, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, I definitely agree as well. Now, this movie went through a lot of problems behind the scenes. Originally, they wanted to be a darker movie rated PG-13, very similar to, a bit of a darker tone with Antz and with The Prince of Egypt. But then there was some concepts that were kind of like shifted around to make it a little bit more lighter in tone. And when this movie came out in theaters, this movie was like bashed by the critics. In fact, it was like a huge, financial failure for DreamWorks. They claimed that it was a huge step backwards in terms of the quirkiness of Antz and the grand scale of The Prince of Egypt. But since then, the Road to El Dorado has become a bit of a cult classic. But and here's the thing, I never watched Road to El Dorado before doing Dream Machine, and when I watched it, yeah, I agree with you, Aaron. It's pretty middle of the road, and I can understand why it didn't really resonate with a lot of people when it first came out.
Okay, so getting into the story, in Spain 1519, two Spanish con men known as Tulio and Miguel win a map to the legendary City of Gold, El Dorado, in a rigged gambling match, though ironically they did win it fairly. After being accused of cheating with loaded dice, the two evade capture while being chased by a bull and hide in barrels, which is shortly loaded onto ships to be led by Herman Cortes to the New World. And so, I guess the entrance into the film, obviously they did the whole, elaborate, musical number to bring us all in, and obviously the Prince of Egypt did this as well, and also let's say that other animated films haven't done this trade at all, but I don't know, our introduction to what are supposedly our protagonists, and I know I'm probably going to get some probably negative comments about this, but I did not like the protagonists in this film. Okay,
I can understand what they were trying to go for when it came to Tulio and Miguel. Very similar to how Newman and Redford were in Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. They're supposed to be like these troublemaking protagonists who have a lot of charm in them, and who kind of like woo people into their jokes, into their quirks. But the difference between Newman and Redford is that they had such wonderful chemistry. If you ever watched, Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, they had this bit of charm that when it came to like them causing a lot of trouble in the Wild West, and when it came to trying to rob the train, and when it came to them trying to retire and go over to South America to live a better life, and then tragedy hits. I'm not going to spoil it, but they at least had some differences that made them unique. But here, I don't really see a lot of differences between Miguel and Tulio, except that, one of them is a lot more restrained than the other. But they both seem to have... They're more or less the same person.
Yeah, it's the thing with it is that I think putting the characters aside, I think this is the whole premise of them being like, confidence tricksters and con artists and stuff like that. It's like, I don't know, like, I kind of find it hard to root for somebody like that. The fact that, also on top of that as well, like, these guys who they're doing all this gambling with, I mean, we barely even know who they are. Like, we don't know if they're bad guys or if they're good guys. For all they know, they could be screwing over, people trying to, raise money for orphans for all we know.
Yeah, but it is nice to know that we did start off with just a bunch of scumbags, and one of them just so happens to have the map to El Dorado. How did he get it? Where did he find it? Nobody knows. Never answered.
I know, it's just, and that thing is kind of weird itself. Like, oh, hey, I've got this map to, like, El Dorado. It's like, at least, like, I mean, in Indiana Jones, when, Indiana Jones finds, like, something to, finds, like, a clue to, like, some ancient treasure or something like that. Like, there was some kind of logical sense of how he obtained it, wasn't there? Like,
yeah, sure. I mean, he's an archaeologist. This is what he does for a living. If you ever seen any of the Indiana Jones prequel movies or even the TV series back in the 90s, you know that he has been doing this for a very long time. Even his father was an explorer. So he was able to gain enough experience so he can be able to hear information about a lost treasure and, go out of his way to search for it. That makes sense. But you have some random guy in the street who just so happens to find a map leading to a city made of gold.
Yeah. Now I know some people are going to point this out, but it wasn't. I mean, I'm going to surprise everyone here. I've never seen Titanic, like, or at least I have seen it. You have, like, wasn't Leonardo DiCaprio's character kind of like a deceiver in some way? Was he?
Yeah.
He was.
In the beginning of the movie, Jack, Fabrizio, and two other guys were playing poker in exchange, for whoever won gets to win some money, a watch, and 2 tickets to the Titanic. But that happened 10 minutes before the boat was going to be boarding. So the guys who had bought the tickets previously probably did it like beforehand, and they were betting money on, oh, guess what? I'm gonna bet that I'm gonna not only go to Titanic, but I'm gonna take your money and I'm gonna take your watch. And Jack and Fabrizio were like betting like everything they had in order for them to see if they could have a trip to go to the Titanic, which was basically going to America. And Jack got the full house and he won the tickets, and that happened like at the day that it was happening. So we actually get to see how they were able to get in. So it's never explained on how this guy was able to get it. And I mean, it's funny because this could have been like a scheme that, oh, maybe this map was a fake, but and Miguel and Tulio, they had like a bunch of gold. But then this guy comes along and says, hey, I'm going to bet this map. I mean, if they're con artists, they could probably tell if it's a real or a fake because, they do stuff like this. They had weighted dice. They could probably tell in an instant. It's like, oh, maybe the architecture is fake, or maybe the language that is written in it is not real. I don't know. It just seemed like really sketchy that they, at least one of the guys was able to like do it right away, even though that they're con artists and they probably schemed so many people before.
Yeah. So they end up boarding the ship, and obviously they end up getting confronted by Cortes, who's. Here's the thing about this: like, he's kind of like one, I think, supposedly of our main villains, I guess.
Yeah, like... and this actually did happen in real life, in which Cortes went over to the he discovered the Aztecs. And they thought that he was a god, but he pretty much just like took advantage of them and overthrew the Aztec temple. That actually did happen in real life. Mm-hmm. And I thought that maybe similar to the Prince of Egypt, that, oh, maybe they wouldn't exactly like tell fully of what happened in, during, Cortez's, discovery of Mexico, but maybe they'll kind of like fudge it a little bit enough, for the kids to kind of, not like see the major repercussions of what happened, because what happened was pretty brutal. actually. But
Mm-hmm.
no, I mean, it's not. I mean, Cortez doesn't really like become like a major focus. I mean, he doesn't even take over Mexico in the end of the movie.
Yeah, I just
It
think.
just focuses on the con men.
Yeah, it does, and I think in regards to this whole the whole first act, I just think it just feels kind of weird and off pace. A little bit, and then all of a sudden, they end up getting thrown into the brig, and then they escape the brig with the help of a horse known as Alvito, I think it was.
Yeah, Albito, yeah.
Yeah, this is the thing. This is another thing about this film at all. I remember Julio and Miguel, but I don't remember most of anyone else in this film. Really,
yeah, it's true. I mean, I guess you could argue maybe Chell, or maybe some of the maybe like the priest and the king, but yeah, this horse, you're trying to have like a bit of personality, but it kind of falls flat to me. I think that it wasn't perfected for me with like a memorable horse character until the horse from Tangled.
Mm-hmm.
That horse is awesome.
Yeah. So they obviously escape the boat, and then they get to they finally get onto dry land, and then after this another musical number of them searching through the jungle, that they finally find the road to El Dorado, and yeah, it's just like there's another thing about road to El Dorado as well. Besides, it's tough to be a god. Can you remember any other of the musical numbers in this?
No,
No,
absolutely not. And it sucks too because it was done by Elton John and Tim Rice, who also did the music for the
Lion King, yeah,
and their music was incredibly memorable. But yeah, other than that one song, I don't remember a single one.
Yeah, it's and also Hans Zimmer as well. Like, he doesn't really bring anything. His music's just kind of in the background, really. You kind of too. There's one thing I will say about this film, which I think is pretty worth noting. The art in this movie is beautiful.
Yes,
I'll definitely say that.
Like, I do like the fact that it's varied. It goes from Spain, which has all the buildings and has the bull, and you have the ships that are sailing over to the New World. Then you have the ocean, which looks amazing, and then finally you have El Dorado, which is beautiful with its greenery and the gold glistening. It's amazing, absolutely.
Yeah, I just think some of this stuff is kind of like Miyazaki level a little bit, like all those water creatures that are like in the sea and stuff like that was quite amazing to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really creative. I do have to give this movie that the animation is gorgeous, and the designs of the creatures and the settings are just amazing. I think that maybe for some people they're able to appreciate the art in this movie, which I can definitely see why.
Yeah. So we're then introduced to the city's elders, which is Chief Tanabok and also Tizel Khan, who is the wicked high priest. And
of course, there has to be either an evil priest or a vizier to the king in pretty much every movie ever since Aladdin.
Yeah, I tell you, when I first saw him come over screen, I was like, "Yeah, how you doing, Jafar?" It's like it's like yeah. There's another thing as well. Don't you think Road to El Dorado? Don't you think a lot of it is borrowed? A little bit. It's like, like the beginning of the scene when they win the map. It's like that kind of feels borrowed from Titanic, and now here we have this priest who kind of feels borrowed from Jafar from Aladdin, and then you have we have the comical duo, and it's like, and you told me there was that was a reference to another movie, from a while back ago. It's like, it just feels like, okay, let's borrow some of this, let's borrow some of that, let's take some of this, let's take some of that. It doesn't feel like. It doesn't feel all that original when you look at it, really. It's like...
and I know they're trying, and I know they're really trying, because they're trying to make Miguel and Tulio this dynamic duo. They're trying to make the characters endearing and kind of sadistic and sinister. I know that they're really trying, but I don't know. There's just something about it that doesn't feel like... I don't know. There's something about it just doesn't click for me.
Yeah, I guess one thing, one person I guess I'd probably say, probably being a guy, probably the memorable character is Chell. Just like, just how she's on the screen and everything. Like,
Oh yes,
yeah.
I mean, it's Rosie Perez. I mean, every time that you see Rosie Perez in anything, you just immediately gravitate to her voice and the way that she acts. I mean, it's no brainer.
Yeah, and they drew her nearly naked as well. Let's face it. Like, she's the eye candy of this whole thing, pretty much. And like,
but one of the things that I do appreciate about this is that she's not the love interest. She's just as much of a con artist as Miguel and Tulio, and I can really appreciate that she's not just like some pretty princess who wants to leave El Dorado because she's so bored with the way that things are, and she wants to adventure out into vast lands, and no, at least she's different. I can give her that.
And like, but it's kind of uncharacteristically different as well. It's like she's somebody who's like spent like time in an isolated tribe of people. She doesn't really like. She kind of sounds like she knows kind of like what the outside world is like, which is really
that is very strange because. I mean, she's not really that shocked with Miguel and Tulio walking in, and the fact that they have white skin and are riding a horse. Which I want to remind you, in Mexico back then, they didn't have horses. I mean, she's not even like remotely shocked. I mean, she kind of suspects that they're kind of off when. She sneaks into their room and they're talking about like that they're going to pretend to be gods. And then she kind of like weasels them into her plan about that she wants to have a third of the gold and she wants to go with them to wherever that, they plan on going to. So there's not much of a shock when she finds out about their evil plan. And, and I'm also really intrigued about the fact that the king is being pushed around by the priest. Even though that the king is supposed to be the ruler of El Dorado, the priest seems to be like dismissive of him, which actually just gives a pretty interesting point about
my argument to that would be is that he proclaims to be the voice of the gods, and so like
exactly.
That's his power play in this whole political structure of the El Dorado people.
Right. Yeah. And that's an interesting argument about how priests and how shaman medicine people, they seem to have like a bit of power that a king cannot do, like whether it be speaking to the gods or talking to the spirits and seeing if they can be able to bring rain or make the crops good. So it kind of gives an underline about how much power that somebody like that has.
Mm-hmm. So Tanabok says that at least it'll take them at least 3 days to construct a vessel for them to leave with all the gold and everything. So obviously there's like 3 days of like hijinks and like that's the thing. Like, the boat is kind of like the plot device to like keep them in the city. So like all these hijinks can like all ensue and like the whole story plays out. And so that's so all of that goes on. And meanwhile, Cortes is arrived on the island and he's going to. So they're building up basically that threat, but it's I guess you could say one thing about this film is that I guess there are a lot of threats that can be that are there for our protagonist. It's not just this high priest who's really crazy and wants to kill everybody, but then there's also Cortes as well, who's going to be bringing his men to potentially be a problem for the El Dorado people. But then at the same time, but the problem with that is then you're stuck with these two kind of knuckleheads who are kind of like, oh, we're going to fleece these people anyway. Like, I feel really sorry for this tribe of people. Because like here's all these people that want to destroy them pretty much. Like
there is like no cushioning for the people of El Dorado. They pretty much get screwed over. It's either you have these guys who are pretending to be gods and they're taking gold and they have no interest about what the other people are feeling. I mean, I'm sure, yes, absolutely, that there is a part in the middle of the movie in which, they see how, they're being frightened and they're being told that, to stay away from the neighborhood because the gods will, seek wrath on them and punish them. And, that does get, brought up. But, then but they still want to steal the gold and they still want to go away. Instead of like, oh, maybe we should stay and, kind of like, share everything that we know about Spain and maybe we can help these people out. And, of course, then we have Cortes, who wants nothing more than to find Miguel and Tulio and take them back to their ship. But then, oh, we just so happen to stumble upon this land that is filled with gold. And, we, as mentioned before in history, he takes over the Aztec kingdom and pretty much just like decimates the whole thing, which nowadays, it's now known as Mexico, and everything is like left into ruins. But
yeah. But so anyway, maybe back into the movie, and this is the so there's that going on. Then there's somehow they managed to throw in a Chell, Tulio romance into that as well, and I don't know. It just feels like all the craziness going on. Apparently, there's still time for that. So
yeah, that was really tacked in. I didn't like it.
Yeah, and also some of that is when they kind of implied that they both had sex. Like it's kind of like that it kind of just forces in like that's what Shell's there for, pretty much. It's like which is unfortunate. So I'm sure there was a lot of Rule 34 fan artists that made a lot of sense out of that. But yeah, so there's that, and then but then there's there's some likability. I guess like 45 minutes into the movie with Miguel when he finally starts warming up to the tribespeople and thinking, hey, maybe these are people that we shouldn't be scamming out of gold.
Yeah, that's one of the scenes that I really did like, is that he's actually doing like that montage of one of the songs that you don't really remember, and seeing about how these people live and feeding the animals and interacting with the children. I like that scene.
Yeah,
I just wish there was more of that.
Well, on top of that as well, like dare I say, probably Miguel's probably more down to earth than Tulio is, because in regards to I mean, this is the thing, we don't know these guys' backstory. Like did they grow up together? Did they? Were they adopted brothers in some way? Like were they? Well, we don't really know the history between these two people. Really, like
no, we don't.
No.
We don't at all, and that's a real shame because. I know that they're trying to build up these characters into likable protagonists, but yeah, you're right. We don't really know about them. I mean, were they always in the streets and they had to, con people so that they could be able to eat? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe their parents died at an early age and maybe they had to stick together. Yeah, there's nothing really explaining on why they are the way they are.
Mm-hmm. So, so then they end up kind of like having the traditional falling out between the two black people because of course, like and I get that maybe I'm being a little bit rough on this movie because I know we've had like I guess that it was made in 2000 and that was kind of like the that was what stories were kind of like telling at the time, like, oh, here's two buddy guys, they'll break up halfway through the film and then they'll get back together in the crescendo. And like so that kind of plays out as well, and and then but yeah, that happens, and then they have the big finale that's to stop the priest and the Cortes from storming their way into El Dorado, and they crash they crash down the cave that they entered into, and that stops them basically.
Yeah, it's like. Easily problem solved.
Yeah. So I mean, there is one, but when some of the people in the El Dorado were starting to catch on that they weren't actually gods. Like I thought, like when Chief Turnbuck was, he's there with his cigar and like he's like saying, oh, we're all just human, and like he's kind of like hinting on that he knows that these two guys are not gods, and like I'm thinking like if you spend this time really believing that, and then all of a sudden you believe that they're not, like, wouldn't you be really angry at that, rather than kind of like, oh yeah, I'm, kind of hinting that, he's in on the scam now? Like, that bit was really confusing to me.
That is really confusing because, I mean, they basically believed that these people were gods. They were going to help them in the age of the Jaguar and, bring prosperity into, the city of El Dorado. But, yeah. The fact that
which is kind of hilarious because they already had prosperity. They had all the gold. And
exactly. So it's like, what prosperity else? What else do you want?
I know, like that bit was never really explained either. Like it was like because the high priest was kind of like, oh, we got to have like a sacrifice-a-thon, pretty much. Or like
the sacrifice is a lot more toned down compared to what real sacrifices in the Aztecs was. It's like their sacrifices were brutal.
I'll
Like,
give
we're
you that.
talking
I'll give you that. But in the context of the film, it was kind of like that was just kind of his thing. You know, like it's
exactly
like, yeah.
like giving sacrifices, which it does follow in the Aztec culture about like giving sacrifices, especially to the enemy, prisoners. They would do this too.
Yeah, but
So
but let me say this, and I guess some people are going to say, well, that is, what Aztec people, were somewhat about. At least it kind of hints to that. Like, well, I tell you, when we get to our next film, I'll definitely tell you why, sticking so far, to a story to the key is a bit of a problem, and why at least you should take liberties when trying to entertain people. So
sure.
We'll definitely explain about that in the later film. But yeah, I think I mean, there's not much else really to say about it. Really, it's just kind of like
So basically, the climax is that you have the priest turning into like this rock creature, and then you have Tulio, Miguel, and Chell riding the boat with a bunch of gold, trying to escape, and then they end up losing every single bit of the gold, and the only gold they have left is the horse, because he was. He had, hooves made of gold, and they didn't know that, and we just kind of see them riding away.
Yeah, like also the magic in this movie isn't really well explained. Pretty much, it's like here's this high priest, like who's like he's kind of like a god himself in a way, because like he slices his hand, and then all of a sudden it like repairs itself. Like
he's Piccolo from Dragon Ball Z.
I know, it's like it's really strange. It's like he's like a Mortal Kombat character, pretty much. It's like he's like Raiden from Mortal Kombat. Maybe not Raiden, but he looks himself like he's above mortals, and like he can do like all this crazy stuff. And, like he makes all this stuff appear and like everything like that. And like there's no, he's more. Dare I say he's probably more confusing than Elsa from Frozen, because he's like his power's not really all that explained of like why does he do these types of things. Besides,
and also I'm also asking about the fact that, in the Prince of Egypt, Hotep and Hoi, who were the magicians to the pharaoh, there was an explanation on how they were able to do their magic. They're magicians. It was all smoke and mirrors.
Mm-hmm.
And when it came to like the plagues of Egypt, they couldn't do anything about it. But here, the priest is able to do all this stuff, and it's never explained on how. Is it smoke and mirrors? Is that what it is? But
oh no, you think that him controlling that jaguar, that robotic jaguar, was all smoke and mirrors? Do you think? And then
I guess not. I mean,
no.
especially since back then they didn't have like technology in which they were able to have that like a robotic jaguar. So no, of course not. It's never explained.
Well, my only explanation is that he's been it's been 10 years since Ghostbusters, and like he's been possessed by Gozer or something. I don't know. Like I don't know what else to explain. What this magic is, how the magic works in this film. But I get magic in itself is a magical element. But in the context of a movie, at least like take for example like Harry Potter. Like at least that has some kind of consistency to it, like how the magic all works in that. But besides that, like in this film, it's just really weird because you feel like you're flipping through phases. Yeah, the magic. You don't know whether you're going to be going through a con artist movie, or if you're going through a magical fantasy movie, or whether you're going through like a buddy comedy, or like, or you're going through like the romance between Tulio and Chell. It's just like it feels all thrown together and kind of mixed around, but it doesn't really. It feels like more like some kind of compound that you really made rather than something that's kind of fluid.
Yeah. You can definitely tell that this movie went through some major behind-the-scenes issues of what the story was originally going to be about, because it doesn't feel cohesive.
I tell you, at one point I was expecting, a cheese with eyes coming up and saying, "I am the cheese. I am the best part of this movie." Like, oh my god. Oh dear. So anyway, though they have no. The ending of the movie is really kind of a bit strange as well, because it's just kind of like just Chell stealing the horse and then running after her. How are you guys gonna get back to Spain? How are you guys gonna How are you guys gonna gonna eat? Like you're in the middle of nowhere from the looks of it, and now you're just running after her. I don't get that. You know?
Yeah, I guess maybe they left it on the cliffhangers, like, more adventures ensue. But the movie was such a bomb that they decided, no, we're not doing this again.
Yeah, unfortunately, that was that. Like,
Right.
So, going on to its critical reception, it was 48% on Rotten Tomatoes, pretty much. So it was again, it's a middle of the road film. You can definitely tell, like, there are some good bits to it. I tell you what, I will admit the romance between Tulio and Chell is quite cute. Like, I would love there to be, I really hope there isn't going to be a sequel, but, if there was a sequel, I'd really only to be, like, kind of like those two, kind of like working out their relationship while being con artists, Like, kind of being a dark humor.
Similar to the Uncharted series, maybe they can just, like, travel to another, another civilization and maybe try to, do something there. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. So, at the box office, actually, on its opening weekend, it actually did $12 million, and actually went behind number 2 on behind previous year's Erin Brockovich on the third weekend. The film closed in June 29, 2000, earning only $50 million, and only another $25 million overseas, and its worldwide total was $76 million in apiece, but it did not do enough to recoup its nearly $100 million budget.
Yeah, that's true. And in fact, I actually do want to mention about movies in 2000. Most of them were either box office failures or most of them were just pretty forgettable. Like, I'm actually going to read you a list of the highest grossing animated movies of 2000. Well, more like a top 9, because number 10 is actually a Japanese movie and it never released in America or anywhere else. So I'm not gonna count that. But
well, tell us what that one is anyway, just in case it's is it a Miyazaki one or is it a?
No, it's not a Miyazaki one. It's
okay.
Let me see if I can pronounce this. Hold on.
She's having a go, ladies and gentlemen.
I know. I'm having a go. Let's see.
How do you pronounce it?
Okay, here it is. Got it. Number 10 is Doraemon, Nobita, and the Legend of the Sun King.
Okay.
Doraemon is, the little blue kitten, and I know that he's really popular in Japan, but we never got him in America until, like, much later on. So. Mm-hmm. Number 9 is Titan AE, which only made $36 million, and that was a box office failure.
Yeah, like, that's a shame, really, because there is actually a cult following for Titan AE. So,
yes, okay. I actually did talk about Titan AE in my Fox Animation Studios podcast, which you can go check out.
Mm-hmm.
Then number 8 is The Road to El Dorado.
Yeah.
Number 7 is Fantasia 2000, which made $90 million.
Oh boy! Like no, didn't hold a candle up to Fantasia, the original one. So.
Number 6 is the Tigger Movie, which made $96 million.
Does they actually remember the Tigger Movie? Like.
I guess if you're a Winnie the Pooh fan, but I actually saw the Tigger Movie in theaters, and there were a couple of other Winnie the Pooh movies that came out throughout the 90s and 2000s, and I actually liked that one. I haven't seen the Piglet movie or the other ones that came out afterwards. But that was Disney Toon Studios, and we did talk about Disney Toon Studios in another podcast where they were known for doing the direct-to-video movies.
Okay.
Okay, number 5 is Rugrats in Paris, the movie, which made $103 million.
Okay.
Number 4 is Pokemon the Movie 2000, which made $133 million.
Well, let's face it, the fact that we're in the twilight of the Pokemon craze, I think we can be given that was going to be a high grossing movie in 2000, I think.
Okay, number 3 is The Emperor's New Groove, which made $169 million.
Mm-hmm.
Which it's funny because The Emperor's New Groove, I believe, came out a few months after The Road to El Dorado, or maybe it was a few months before. And I remember that there was a lot of comparisons between the two movies because it's it's a buddy cop movie. It takes place in South America, and wacky hijinks happens.
Yeah, I just think for me, it's I never. I'll be honest, I've never seen The Emperor's New Groove, so I'm not. I've only ever just seen clips of it, really. So
Okay. Number 2 is Chicken Run, which made $224 million.
which, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, we will be reviewing on Remembrance Day. So
Yes, and you know what? It's funny because Chicken Run is still, as of 2018, the highest grossing stop motion animated movie ever.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you're not even gonna believe what's number 1. You're gonna cry.
What's number 1?
Number 1, making $349 million at the box office, is Dinosaur.
Dinosaur. Well, I'll tell you what. Actually, I can. Dinosaur was a kind of a thing at that time. Like, I can't understand why it's. Why it was, because it was. It wasn't. It wasn't anything to really know. Basically, it was just like dinosaur meets up with other dinosaurs and walks towards the new. To their new laying patch, I guess.
Yeah,
So,
Land Before Time, you are not.
yeah, definitely not.
But yeah, you can see like those movies. I mean, either a lot of these movies were just either okay or they were box office bombs. So yeah, the year 2000 was not a good year for animated movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was The Road to El Dorado, and so as you can probably tell, it was not massively noteworthy. But mind you, ladies and gentlemen, the next one we're going to be reviewing next week, we need to have a sit down and talk about. So,
yes,
yeah.
we do.
So from me, Aaron,
And Patricia.
take care, and bye for now.
See you later.